Hi, this is Steve Addison for the Movements Podcast, the podcast for people who want to multiply disciples and churches everywhere. Today we're talking to Tony Lasavath about what it means to finish well in one field in Southeast Asia and to begin again in another, the United States. Tony, what have you been up to?
God's been up to things. So in the last year or so, since we've come back from Asia to North America, God has been doing stuff both in Southeast Asia and in Texas, where we're currently staying. Since the last year and a half, we've transitioned back from Southeast Asia to North America. And as we were talking about the major cities and the gap for unreached people, we were talking with other NPL folks and looking at maps and praying about it. But God led us to the big, wonderful state of Texas. And so Dallas-Fort Worth, Texas is 8.3 million people. That's crazy, Steve. That's huge. It's one of the third largest cities in North America. And so we said, hey, God has used us over 15 years in Southeast Asia, and all the experiences of all the different people groups, the Buddhist world, the animist world, kind of exists in this metroplex. And we feel like we can really be used by God here, but there's also a huge gap to train people. And so that's what we've been doing in the past 6 months or so, since we've been in Texas. And one of the things that I'm learning is how to balance leaving one field and entering into a new one. And the old field, which is Southeast Asia, I'm still helping and coaching and helping run strategy.
Okay, so you've just come back from Southeast Asia. What's been happening in the time that you've been away?
So in the time that I've been away, I've been back several times. I think one of those trips with you, actually, Steve. So we had a great time. Part of that is a different role, a different season, is coaching. We've always known that our time in Asia was like a scaffolding. We weren't there to lead the work. We were there to raise up catalysts and be like that scaffolding. And now that scaffolding is coming down, there is an existing network of leaders. We call them 139. So there's a group of leaders all around the country in Southeast Asia, this one country. They have their 3 disciples, and those 3 leaders are mentoring other 3. And so there's a network, and they're doing what we call iron on irons throughout the country. They're meeting consistently, and they're working through the word whenever they face persecution. And so that continues to happen. But yeah, last week we were just there with brothers and sisters that have been persecuted. And there were a lot of cheers because these are people that we've walked with for probably over a decade. Some of them we just knew from a friend, but we had about 30 people from around the country come together. And there were widows. There were people who had chased out of their village. There were people who had their homes destroyed. There were friends that spent time in prison. And there was one young boy, he was 3 years old. His name was One Knee. And when I saw him, my wife and I, when we saw him, we had to turn around, and because we were tearing up because we knew his father. I had discipled his father, and me and a teammate in this country, we met him and we worked with him, and he multiplied churches. But yeah, he was taken from this earth about 3 years ago. He was killed for his faith in a brutal way. And his son, One Knee, he was only like 10, 11 months old at the time. And so here he is smiling, having a great time. But he doesn't have a father. He doesn't know anything about the history, but we do. And they're just suffering, but also persevering. And so it was just great to see that the seed that we helped plant, the vision for the nations and for movement, really, it took a lot of sacrifice. It took literally lives. And so I'm staring at that room and I'm looking at all these people and I'm wondering, like, God, this is what we gave our life for. And through those relationships, through those networks, we've seen thousands of baptisms. The last year in that country, we saw 82 new churches, 17,000 salvations, and about 8,000 baptisms. So again, and I'm looking at this room full of people who suffered for their faith, and I'm looking at John 12:24, and I'm reading Hebrews 13:3 to them to encourage them to remember those in prison, those in suffering, and this is it. So this is what it means that the seed must die in order for the kingdom of God to grow. And so I was just overwhelmed with emotion and grace that God has given my wife and I, like this experience to be part of the nations. And that was, that's still 15 years of our life. And now we're in a new phase, Steve.
What did you learn about the importance of leaving the field? What impact has that made, you not being there?
I think especially, I mentioned the 139s. For many years, we tried to help leaders consistently meet together for problem solving, Bible discovery, and coaching. And a lot of that, as outsiders, myself, other friends like Daniel Scullid and other just coaches are coming in and coaching the work. But the most important lesson is it was never my vision to begin with. I may have brought the original idea or say, hey, this is how we see movements happen in the Bible. This is what Jesus said about the kingdom of God and the four fields. This is how we're going to do 3/3 group, look back, look up, look forward. And this is how we're going to adapt it into the local language, into the local culture. I may have come up with a lot of those things and helped, but then I realized that it's really their vision that we activated. Like God had brought Brother C, who passed away, who was martyred. He had a vision to reach his entire area. It may have been just his province, but it was his vision. And again, it was us casting the vision, but God, the Holy Spirit, activated it in him. And also him, there's dozens of other leaders. And when I hear their vision statement, I was like, you know what? That might have been my original vision, but it's no longer mine. And it never was to begin with. It's, wow, this brother has a vision to see every people and every place reached, and he's willing to do whatever it takes. And that's what I left America with all those years ago. And now it's imparted in the local believers and local leaders.
So what are you learning about your role now in terms of the work in Southeast Asia?
I'm learning that there is a need for, I was talking with some other people, Jeff Sandell included, but just the need for more of, again, that insider-outsider partnership, especially from level 4, level 5, meaning there are great people who have been trained here in the States, elsewhere in the West, like they're doing the playbook, they're learning from the biblical principles, they're really effective in this culture, and then they're crossing into these different cultures. And yet people are still having a hard time helping L3 and L4 leaders, meaning helping network leaders cross-pollinate across different cultures and different languages. So you may be an effective church planner. Again, Greg, that's a skill that we don't often learn and pick up unless we're crossing cultures intentionally. And so there's a need for more of those types of people who say, hey, these guys are effective strategy coordinators, but they're also really good at listening. And they're really good at loving people, being patient and being humble across these different cultures. So God is moving, and we need more of those types of leaders that can cross those bridges, especially on a higher level between networks.
And now you've settled in Dallas, the Dallas-Fort Worth area. How's that going? What's opening up in the States?
We're sitting here in a soccer field. My daughter's on the bench right now, but she's part of the team. And this is quite an experience for us. We're not really used to the lights. And again, this is part of American culture. It's also part of the church culture. You have a huge amount of resources. You have thousands of churches. So why would anyone want to come to a place like Dallas-Fort Worth and plant churches or make disciples? I think, number one, it is a huge gap. Again, I mentioned 8 million people, and we're learning that we're just riding the waves of the fruit that has been planted, meaning there are people from the NPL network, others who have labored locally in the same way that we labored locally in Asia for almost 2 decades. There are people who've done the same thing here. And so it's a blessing, number one, to come alongside and maybe pick some of the low-hanging fruit, which is really churches. And some of these churches are ethnic churches. So whether they're Asian churches or South Asian churches or even like African churches, a lot of the ethnic churches, again, they're not planting churches and they're not sharing their faith and they're not making disciples. And so there's a huge cultural gap, a cultural need. So there's still a need to train churches, Steve. Even though there's thousands of churches, there's millions of dollars in resources to the church. but the church themselves, especially here in the West, and especially in this city, they need help in transitioning the gospel into spiritual conversations and taking it across the cultures, across the neighborhoods. So there's a huge South Asian population. I don't know what it is, hundreds of thousands from India, Southeast Asia as well too. And of course, from the Muslim world, hundreds of thousands. And so you find churches are very, what's the word? Segregated. And so there's not a lot of crossing cultures, especially for the gospel. And I find that this is a huge need, and God has gifted us uniquely. And we're really excited to just come alongside pastors and leaders, but also enter the harvest and find new workers, new people who are willing to suffer and to obey and to follow Jesus.
What's been some of the highlights so far?
Again, we've only been here 6 months, still learning. We're still learning about what football teams we should support. Honestly, depending on the right or wrong team, you might get shot over here if you're cheering for the wrong team. But we're still learning, again, the culture. We're learning where all the strategic areas are in the city. There's over 26 different Buddhist temples here. There's probably double that in Hindu temples. And if you count the mosques, that's more than both of those put together. And so we're looking at what does it look like to develop a prayer strategy for the city? How can we get the practitioners that are the same vision, same heart, really same no place left methods together with synergy, with chemistry, and pray together and run together and resource one another. And so in the last 6 months, we started a house church just in our home. It's really just the beginning. We have probably 20 people. A few are not believers. And so we said, hey, we really want to make this a place where people are unchurched. They're either post-church or unchurched. And so we have a few of those people coming. And of course, we have several people from the churches that I mentioned that are onboarding, meaning that they're training and they're joining what we call a residency. And so for Dallas-Fort Worth, we want to start a residency where there's a group, a band that's learning together, that's going together, that's growing together, and with the idea that they're going to be sent to the nations and to the hubs that are doing the same thing overseas. And as we do the residency, we're meeting people in the field. And so we're starting with church in our home, and hopefully that's going to multiply into another house church, just serving churches wherever they're at. So we're doing our own 0 to 1. We're doing networking. And yes, Steve, in this season, I think we have trainings probably every week. Some of them are gospel conversations training. Some of them are 4 fields intensives. And I'm also helping Southern California, where I'm from. So at the moment, I'm focused on Southeast Asia, SoCal, and Dallas-Fort Worth.
What's it been like to go into the harvest? Just take us into that. Describe what that is.
Yeah, it's been really exciting. I think for somebody who has been in a cross-cultural context for such a long time and playing, I become all things to all men so that by doing so, they may come to know Christ. So just like Paul going into a different culture, I've had to play that role for many years as a coach and as an outsider. But now that I'm back in America, we're just sharing the gospel freely everywhere, all the time with everyone. It was 4 weeks ago, we did a gospel conversations training with a local ethnic Lao church. There was about 4 or 5 Lao churches involved. And they had been in this neighborhood for 30 years. And right down the street, there's this huge Buddhist temple. And they have a heart, they have a vision, they have a love for their neighbors and for the Lao people in their neighborhood. But they had never gone out and actually shared the gospel. They prayed, and they have canvassed the neighborhoods. They've invited people to church. But on this day, there was probably 20 of us. We split up into teams and we started knocking on doors, blessing people. And we actually led one family of faith. They weren't Lao family. Sorry, can you hear that?
No, we're
okay,
fine.
All right. Sounds like somebody just scored. So we were prayer walking with, again, training this local Lao church, and one family came to faith. It was a family of 5, the couple, husband and wife. We held hands, shared the gospel. She had a tattoo of 3 crosses. They were Mexican, they were Catholic. And they said, hey, I don't know what this means. I think it's a cool tattoo. It's part of our culture. I said, hey, let me explain to you what that means. We shared the story using the 3 circles. And so it was me and some other Lao leaders. And so this family came to faith right at that moment. We got their contact information for follow-up. And as we were debriefing, man, the leaders was like, man, they just felt overwhelming God's grace and glory. They've been focused so long on kind of their people, but for the first time, God opened their eyes up to say, hey, we're supposed to share the gospel with everybody within proximity. They have a heart for their people. They want to love them. But at the same time, I think God gave them a vision to be equipped to share everywhere at all times. And so that was just one example of one first generation ethnic church stepping out into a different culture, even though it's in their same neighborhood.
You've surveyed the field. You've seen the size of the task. You've started a church in your home. You've started a residency to train workers. And you're out training every week with workers and with churches, either the gospel conversations or full fields.
Yes, yeah. And we've also started our first, we call it strategy coordinated training. Again, that was a collaborative effort between all the different counties. So I think there's 4 major counties out of DFW, and there were teams that are doing what we do that all came together for the first time in a long time. I think it's been a while since the citywide network came together, but we focused on what God was doing, how we can mobilize more prayer, and how we can continue encouraging one another and resourcing one another. So that was cool. Some guys have been laboring for 15 years, others for 10, others like us for 6 months. But it's like, hey, we all have the same vision. We're running the same playbook. How can we love each other, learn from each other, and labor together? And so we're going to continue doing that every year. But now there's regional stuff happening, and we're in little signal groups. People are communicating and encouraging one another, sending updates, sending prayer requests. So again, I'd say that's the networking piece.
And that's building on work that others have done. But from what you're saying, you're spending a lot of time out networking, establishing relationships either with churches that want training or other workers in the field. But there's quite a lot of relational time going on around a citywide strategy.
Yeah, I learned this from Huck and Troy and Rick. They told me the first couple of years they spent a lot of hours just having coffee. And myself and our team, we've had coffee with, I think, over a dozen people already. Say, hey, let's just talk and let's just see, what is God doing in your life? What's your vision? What are your challenges? And how can I pray for you? Again, that's just a GCC interview. But yeah, we've met with, again, Black pastors, Chinese pastors, white pastors, and Lao pastors. So just going through the whole gambit of all our oikos and referrals. It's all about relationship and referrals. So, hey, this person knows this person, connect with this person. And we have a ways to go to get through that. So we're still not done with that.
Yeah. And what are you trusting God for in the Dallas-Fort Worth area?
I think the main thing that I'm trusting the Lord for is my family. And so I'm talking about the ministry aspect, but I think this is the same thing, the family. And so one of the main reasons we moved here was to community. And community is something that you either join, you either find it, stumble upon it, or you create it. And I think for us as apostolics, it's really hard for us to find a local church with the big lights. There's hundreds of mega churches. There's Black churches and Hispanic churches and Asian churches. And you can hop around every week just trying to find the right ice cream flavor. But I think for my wife and I, we really felt called to, hey, we're not going to find the perfect community for our kids. And they're not going to have the same experiences we did growing up in America with a multi-ethnic church. Let's create that. Let's trust God and let's just love on people. And he's going to bring the right type of people to be community. And I have 3 kids. My oldest is 17. She's going to a community college with a lot of non-Christians. So she's developing community there. And she's always thinking about ways to share her faith and just to love on people who are lost over that college. My 2 other younger kids are going to this Christian school here. And so they're starting to make friends. And so we have this house church, but it's really their church. Say, hey, what do you guys want to do? I mean, we have our format, look back, look up, look forward. Okay, what do you guys want to do, a birthday, or you guys want to do a Christmas party, and what games do you want to play, or what songs do you want to sing, and how can we make it how can we make this your thing, not mom and dad's thing? Because we don't want to burn out. We don't want the family to say, hey, we don't want to do church in the house anymore. So we're trying to be, so that's what I'm praying for. And that's what I'm trusting God for, is that we would thrive as a family, and that would overflow into all the other relationships, and people who have the vision say, hey, I can do this in my own house, and I can do this in my own home, and I can do this in a way that's not in conflict with or threatening some of the legacy churches, but it's complementing. It's saying, hey, people are finding a place to share their story, to listen to Jesus' story, and to be equipped, right, to make disciples. I think the church, especially here in America, they're so hungry for authenticity, transparency, and equipping. And so there's people all over the city who want to be a part of something like that. And so I'm not worried about really planting churches. I'm just trying to be faithful to how can I love my family well and lead them well, and have them just live on mission. So that's my dream. That's my goal. That's my hope.
So I asked you about your dream for a city of over 8 million people. And you immediately went, we've got to do this as a family in our local community. We've got to live out what we want God to multiply amongst those 8 million.
Yeah, somebody said to me the other day, hey, Tony, this could be overwhelming, 8 million people. And I just see the cup half full. I said, you know what? It's not 8 million. It's 8 million potential seeds that can multiply for the kingdom. Like, we have such a bigger pond, a bigger lake, a bigger ocean to draw from. And we just got to be sensitive to the Holy Spirit. I know he's working. I know there's gifted people out there.
Well, thanks for listening. And if you're enjoying the Movements podcast, there's one thing you can do to help. Just let someone know by leaving a review or spreading the word on social media. I'm Steve Addison for the Movements podcast.